The former Health Minister, Zweli Mkhize, is eyeing the ANC presidency, and he said that he will accept a nomination if that comes through via the branches. Let's discuss. We're joined by Dr Fikile Vilakazi. Thank you for being with us today, Doctor. Look, this has been a long-running speculation about his political hopes and about what his legal troubles mean. Do you think he's a viable candidate, given what has happened with that communications tender and even other claims more recently?
Good evening to you, and good evening to the viewers. It's quite a complicated question. I think when you look at all the scandals and the reports, of course, in relation to corruption. So there are two things that I would point out, right? One, in terms of his capability to lead as a candidate. I think there is no doubt about that. South Africans, particularly within the African National Congress, KwaZulu-Natal in particular, has always shown support for Dr. Zweli Mkhize. However, I think there is a cloud of corruption that we all know about that is surrounding him. And I think that also is a cloud that is not just surrounding him, but the African National Congress. So when you talk about presidency, that is high office, because automatically when somebody becomes a president of the African National Congress, that person automatically also becomes the president of the country. There are key questions then that arise. One of them being the question of ethics, trust and reciprocity within society, which is something that I've always raised to say that he would need to really work very, very hard to regain the trust of citizens. But within the African National Congress itself, we have seen with the regional conferences, elective conferences, that there are divisions already. KwaZulu-Natal, in particular as a region, has started to lose its political weight when it comes to influencing decisions of elected candidates, which is where Dr. Zweli Mkhize will probably be getting a support from. So that support has been shaken, particularly by the Eastern Cape outcomes. We've seen how the Eastern Cape clearly supports the presidency of the current Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa. So those issues are likely to then make it impossible for him to perhaps get this position because of the dwindling and weakening support from the KwaZulu-Natal region, but also because of this cloud of allegations. I would like to point you out, for example, within the African National Congress, there are questions even, within the factions themselves. The ANC has got a constitution. Section 25 of that constitution talks about disciplinary actions. There are just two sections of one that I would like to point out, which is critical for his possible presidency if it does stand up. One of them is Section 2579 of the African National Congress itself, that says that anybody that abuses elected or employed office in the organization or in the state, in this particular case, if he's deployed to obtain any direct or indirect undue advantage or enrichment, has committed an act of misconduct, right? That is in the African National Congress constitution itself. So the question then will arise whether by allowing a president or Dr. Zweli Mkhize to stand for possible presidency, how is that then undermining the constitution of the ANC itself? Yeah. Talk less of the constitution of the country. So those are issues that he will need to then perhaps work very, very hard to clean his name, to clean his character, to clean the reputation, that is required of a possible candidate for presidency.
Well, isn't this an ANC issue? So it's a question of consistency. So the ANC came up with the step-aside rule that has been enforced, but then we saw some candidates being elected to positions despite being subject to the step-aside rule, because there was a gap in that policy around people elected. Then the ANC said, well, nobody else could get elected. But surely that's something that Zweli Mkhize could use to fight back and say, well, look, there was this gap. Could he say that in December if there's still no formal trial or anything underway like that?
Absolutely. We've seen it being used in KwaZulu-Natal with the election of Zandile Gumede as the chairperson of the region. We've seen it being used in other regions as well. Surely anybody that is contesting office for December is likely to use that gap as well. And I think also the recent developments within the National Working Committee of the African National Congress, where there is a statement that says that people who have been, who have allegations over their head or their shoulders would probably be allowed to continue to hold office within the African National Congress, which is highly problematic. So he's likely to use all of that within the organization, because that policy gap creates a loophole that, of course, can be captured by opportunism, political opportunism in this particular instance. And no one would blame him, because this is something that should have been stopped already at regional level electoral conferences. And it's going to play itself as well when you go to provincial election conferences. I mean, we've seen Dr. Zweli Mkhize addressing his faction at the region in eThekwini, which is something that the Premier Usihle Zikalala condemned, to say it is against the constitution of the ANC also to do that. Section 25(17)(10) of the African National Congress Constitution says it very clearly that it is misconduct if any particular political leader organizes factional activities in a way that can threaten unity of the African National Congress. And it's done that at eThekwini, which is something that compromises even this agenda of unity, this agenda of renewal and recovery of the African National Congress. So surely that is something that also is sitting with his character as a leader that is looking to contest for presidency.
The ANC Veterans League, I see the interim committee has also said that, warning the former minister and others around engaging in anti-ANC tendencies. So that's what you're talking about. I've got one last question to throw in. How big is his support base? You spoke about KwaZulu-Natal, and what is his faction? Is there any alignment to the RET faction? Is he seen as a standalone? And what sort of competition could he bring to bear against President Cyril Ramaphosa, who, according to some, is a shoo-in in December?
Well, I mean, Dr. Zweli Mkhize is clearly aligned to the Radical Economic Transformation faction. We have seen that in various places, but particularly where we come from with eThekwini elections, he's aligned to Umama Uzandile Kumete, he's aligned to comments like Umama Batabile Dlamini, Bolindiwe Sisulu, Ace Makhashule, and so on. So we've seen that clearly, that he is for the Radical Economic Transformation faction. In terms of competing with the presidency of Cyril Ramaphosa, I think it's not necessarily going to be a clean sweep of, him getting support, like I've indicated. I think President Cyril Ramaphosa, with the outcomes of the Eastern Cape Conference being now the second largest region of the African National Congress, if the Eastern Cape, for example, manages to send a large number of delegates to the December elective conference, where KwaZulu-Natal perhaps may be dwindling, it's highly likely that President Cyril Ramaphosa is going to perhaps get a second chance of taking the office of the ANC. But it all depends on the power of branches. I mean, branches have got power in the ANC, and it depends on him being able to galvanize the support of the branches, which is something that he's doing. I mean, in February this year, he also already starting to speak to certain groups to start his campaign. He was talking to Amabuto here in KwaZulu-Natal, which is part of the traditional leadership in the province. Yeah. And Amabuto have got some kind of influence. So he's starting to do that work, but it also, like I'm saying to all of us, it really depends on the power of the voter, who in this particular instance are the branches that make their way into the elective conference in December.
I guess if anything, his political ambitions are now clear. Thank you very much for your analysis tonight. That was Dr. Fikile Vilakazi, public policy lecturer and political science lecturer from the University of KwaZulu-Natal.